Hello, this is My Sweet Mess, and welcome to my kitchen, where every week I make a mess trying new recipes in the pursuit of something sweet. This week, I am excited to try a new-to-me recipe for blueberry buckle from Jack and Martha over at A Family Feast, and I'll leave a link to the original recipe in the show notes below. If you've been here before, then you know I love breakfast. It really is the most important meal of the day. And I needed something to take to a work breakfast meeting, and I thought this would be just the thing. So let's get started with our mise en place. Mise en place is a French term which translates to putting in place or everything in its place. It is the process of preparing ingredients and tools before you get started cooking. Essentially what I'm doing is taking a look at my ingredient list and recipe steps before I get started with my bake. I measure everything out and put the ingredients in their own bowls as opposed to measuring and dumping as I go. I also like to take the added step of separating out individual parts of a recipe and placing those ingredients on their own counters, if I have the space. For example, this bake calls for a cake and a streusel topping, so the cake ingredients will be on the counter right in front of me, and streusel ingredients will be on the counter behind me. This helps me stay organized, especially if there are duplicate ingredients across both elements. As you know, I love trying new things, so when I saw the name buckle in the recipe title, I was very curious what that meant for the bake. Well, after a little research, it looks like baking a buckle, which is a single layer cake, usually with fruit mixed into the batter or layered on top and then topped with a streusel, which is the crumbly bits usually on a muffin made from butter, flour, sugar, and spices. As the single layer cake bakes, the batter rises and the fruit and streusel topping sink or buckle into the batter, creating a slightly indented or irregular surface. I imagine that the end of the bake is going to look like something that came out of my grandmother's kitchen, and I could not be more excited. As the name suggests, this recipe calls for adding blueberries to the batter. Today, I'm going to use frozen berries because that's what I have at home, but feel free to use fresh berries. When it comes time to incorporate the berries into the batter, I'm going to sprinkle them with some flour. I won't measure it out, I'll measure with my heart when it's time, but I wanted to let you know to go ahead and save some flour back for the berries. You'll also need flour to go inside your pan, but more on that later. Now that my ingredients are prepped, I will go ahead and preheat my oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Because this is an office event, I'm going to use a disposable foil pan, so I don't have to worry about bringing anything home. Now what I have here is an 8 by 10 inch pan, but you could also use a 9 by 9 inch pan. You'll just have to adjust your cook time. In my 8 by 10 inch pan, I'm going to grease the bottom and the sides with shortening using my impeccably clean hands, making sure that I get shortening in all the corners, nooks, and crannies of the pan. Now that my pan is greased, I'm going to wash my hands really quick. There we go, much better. And then I will add a little bit of flour to my greased pan and turn and tap the pan to make sure that the flour sticks to everything I just greased. Greasing and flouring the pan will make it so much easier to serve the blueberry buckle when it comes time. Once that is all done, I'll set it aside for later. Now that our mise en place is done, it's time to get started with our bake. In a medium or large size mixing bowl, using an electric hand mixer like I have here, or in a stand mixer with a paddle attachment, cream together the shortening and sugar until it is light and fluffy. This is a bit of a messy step, The sugar is spraying everywhere and it is difficult to incorporate the shortening, but I know patience will be rewarded. There came a time in this step where I thought I was done. The sugar and shortening looked incorporated, but not light and fluffy. You'll know you got it right when the shortening and sugar really is light and fluffy, like I'm showing here. Now, I'm not sure how it would look if you kept going, but to me, this looks light and fluffy, and as I'm stirring it, it feels that way as well, so I'm gonna call it good. Next, I'll go ahead and add in my egg, giving it a few turns with my spatula just to bring everything together before I kick on the electric hand mixer to make sure everything is well incorporated. This doesn't take very long at all, but you want to make sure that everything is well mixed. Once that looks good, I will add in the milk and mix until blended. I started the mixer on the lowest speed setting because this is becoming a little soupy, that's a technical term, and I don't want it to splash out of the bowl. Now, to me that looks well incorporated, so I'm just going to set it to the side for later. Now, onto our dry ingredients. In a small to medium-sized bowl with a fine mesh sieve set on top, I will add the flour, baking powder, and the salt and start to sift the dry ingredients together. Dang it! I will not be doing that again. I'm trying to keep my spatula moving around just to help speed up the process of sifting and to combine the salt, baking powder, and flour together as I sift, but I will take care of my spatula movements next time. Once everything is sifted together, I will set this aside just for a second. Now it is time to fold my wet and dry ingredients together. So I have my wet and dry ingredients here, and I will fold the wet and dry ingredients together. What does that even mean? According to an article in Bon Appetit, and I have a link in the description box below to that article, folding is a way of mixing ingredients with different densities to preserve lightness and structure. Now, technically, you should fold the lighter ingredients like whipped egg whites into the heavier, denser ingredients like melted chocolate. If you fold the lighter ingredients into the heavier one, rather than stirring or whisking, you can actually combine them without breaking the air bubbles that you've incorporated into your lighter ingredients. What I ended up doing was folding the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients because the wet ingredients were in a larger bowl, but I don't know that that's necessarily the right thing to do. I'll know better for next time, but I'm wanting to call it out so you know as well. Now, proper technique for folding your ingredients together. You should add 1/3 of your lighter ingredients to your heavier ingredients. I ended up adding about half of my dry ingredients to my wet ingredients. It worked out just fine. And like I said, I'm still learning, so I'll adjust my proportions next time. If you ended up adding half of your wet to dry or dry to wet, it's not a big deal. It's just not technically accurate. But I did get the general concept of it, and I think for now that was good enough. The key to the process is working slowly, and I did do that. Folding takes patience, and the mixture won't come together right away. You just got to keep folding, trying to avoid the urge to stir. If you stir, you'll lose the air that you've worked so hard to incorporate, so just keep folding. And I am not an expert on this, but if I can try it, so can you. After many folds in many minutes, this is what my batter looks like. I think it looks pretty good, so I'm just going to set it to the side and prep my blueberries. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to take my frozen blueberries and coat them in a little bit of flour. Oh, too much. That's okay. I'll just be careful when I pour them into the batter. Flouring your blueberries before adding them to the batter helps prevent them from sinking to the bottom. It also can help minimize the amount of color bleeding from the blueberries, which happens a lot with frozen blueberries. Now, ideally, I'd have 1 or 2 tablespoons of flour and just toss to coat the berries, but I got a little bit more, so like I said earlier, I'll just be careful when I'm putting them into the batter not to dump the whole bowl in. Once they look coated, I'm going to set my berries in batter to the side and get to work on the streusel topping. To make the topping, I will combine the flour, sugar, and cinnamon together in a small bowl, giving that a good stir just to make sure everything is well combined. Next, I will add in my cold butter, and using a fork, I will cut the butter into the dry ingredients until everything looks crumbly. Using cold butter is good for a streusel topping. You really don't want to use room temperature butter because that's too soft. Using cold butter will ensure that the topping holds its shape and adds a bit of texture and crunch. Versus using room temperature butter, you run the risk of the butter melting and spreading out, and you'd miss some of that crunch and texture in your buckle. I think my streusel topping looks pretty good, so let's get the blueberries and the batter and assemble the last little bit of this bake. Alright, I've got my blueberries here, and I'm going to toss them a little bit more with the flour and then add them to the batter, making sure not to dump everything since I used too much flour, and I don't want that added to the bake. Next, I will fold in the berries, trying to give them as few turns as possible. While they are coated in the flour to help with the color bleeding into the batter, I don't want to push my luck and end up with a gray buckle. Once the blueberries look well incorporated to me, I'll grab my previously prepared pan and spread this batter out evenly onto the pan. Yeesh, that is a thick dough. I thought I could just pour it out, but it looks like I'm going to need my spatula to help coax it out of my bowl. And then I'll just use that same spatula to press the batter into the corners of the pan. Once everything looks pretty even, I will get my streusel topping, and using my impeccably clean hands and my bowl with the pour spout, I will disperse the topping onto the batter, making sure to be as even as possible and not to forget the corners. While I am putting that streusel topping on, I can really smell that little bit of cinnamon, and it is wonderful. Before I put this into the oven, because it isn't the sturdiest of pans, I'm going to put a baking sheet underneath just to help add some stability. Because I have an 8 by 10 inch pan, my buckle will cook for 35 to 40 minutes. My oven has been running a little cool lately, so I let mine go for the full 40 minutes, and I think that was the right thing to do because this looks wonderful and smells even better. I love that I can see all the blueberries on top, and the topping looks like it created a nice crunchy shell. I also love the buckle where the batter sunk in some spots to create all those nooks and crannies. I'm going to let this sit in the pan for about 15 minutes before I try it. Now, I know I'm supposed to be taking this to a work event, and I am, but because this is a new to me recipe, I want to make sure that it's 100% okay, you know? And if it is, I'll cut it and stack it so no one knows that I had a little taste first. It'll be our little secret. While this is cooling, I'm going to make a little bit of whipped cream for myself. Using a few splashes of heavy cream in a bowl and my electric hand mixer, I will whip some air into the cream. I also added granulated sugar, I'm looking for soft peaks in my whipping cream, and once I see them, I know I'm all set. Now that my whipping cream looks good, I'm just gonna set this to the side and wait for my 15 minutes to finish up. Now that my 15 minutes is up, it is time to get me a slice. I'm gonna take a piece from the middle because I like the middle piece, and that's all there is to it. Look how wonderful this looks. And look at all those blueberries. This is a blueberry dense buckle, and I am here for it. Because in this recipe, the blueberry is the star. The streusel on top has made a nice shell for the top of the buckle. An excellent textural contrast for the soft cake. Now, the whipped cream is an absolute must. You could also use ice cream if you're serving this as more of an after dinner or after lunch snack with hot tea or coffee. But having a little whipped cream or ice cream definitely sets off the buckle. Now, if you don't want to serve with ice cream or whipped cream, I would recommend adding a little bit of citrus zest to the batter, like an orange or a lemon, just to help wake up the bake a little bit. If you have a work event or a brunch where you need to bring something, look no further. This is it. It came together really quickly. I'm gonna go get a hot cup of coffee to pair with this. Thank you so much for being with me today. I hope you'll share what you learned with me in the comments below. And remember, trying new things is messy, but the end results can be pretty sweet. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.